Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Allen. So the voters have spoken, and by voters I mean the Conservative Party of Canada membership who were eligible to vote in the recent leadership contest. And who was the victor out of that race? None other than Ontario MP Erin O'Toole. He defeated Peter MacKay in a very tight contest. So joining me here in studio to kind of unpackage what happened and where we go from here is MP Dean Allison, the MP for Niagara West. Dean, thank you so much for joining me in studio.
Thanks for having me on the show today.
So this has been, I know we've chatted about this before, but this has been definitely one for the books, a very unusual leadership contest. You had, COVID, you had different timelines changing all the time. Do you think this process was fair, and do you think it resulted in the right candidate at the end?
Well, yeah, I think, like all leadership conventions, races, everyone's got to play by the same rules, right? So the fact that we had COVID did make it easy, but didn't make it easy for everybody. So I think the timeline was always tough. It would have been nice to have a leader when we originally thought, which was sometime in the end of June.
Right.
Because, now we've got a new leader that not a lot of Canadians know. And I'm always concerned about, election being called and not having a chance for people to get to know Erin. So the reality is that, time is important, but we're in a minority government. So it would have been nice to have that process speeded up. But the reality was we were right in the middle of COVID. So I'm pretty proud of the fact that we were able to actually sell record memberships. We were able to bring new people to the party, and we're to hold a leadership contest all during COVID times, which I think is pretty extraordinary.
And I think one thing I always love about leadership contests, it's really an excellent opportunity for Canadians and the membership to loan their voices to who they really believe should lead the party, obviously. But compared to a general election where you have millions of Canadians voting, in a leadership contest, it's really just a fragment of that population. How many people actually casted ballots out of the eligible voters here?
Well, so we had about 170,000 voters already, or membership, people with membership, and then over almost 100,000 memberships were sold. So we had about 269,000. We had 175,000 people vote. That's pretty impressive, I think, given all the things that are going on.
That is very impressive, and that's more so that voted than the last leadership, which resulted in Andrew Scheer winning.
Absolutely.
Wow, so it's quite an opportunity to really exercise your voice, that's for sure. There were four very distinct candidates at the end. Erin O'Toole was really perceived to be the front runner with Peter MacKay, kind of neck and neck, and the results spoke to that, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that Peter MacKay, was definitely the front runner, but Erin O'Toole, I think, ran a better campaign in terms of getting that second vote, right? At the end of the day, when you have a preferential ballot, you've got to be more than just ahead. I mean, every election I've seen happen, leadership recently, the front runner never won. It was the second or third person who was able to convince people for their second votes. And so I think that's what we saw happen here as well, that Erin O'Toole got a lot of second round choices and ended up running the best campaign to win, given the kind of leadership contest we had.
So given, the history in the last few years within the Conservative Party of Canada, we had Maxime Bernier really close, come into a second position in the last leadership race, leave and start his own party. We've had, a general, not super exciting leadership, but, there were some barbs exchanged. What are there going to be some of the challenges for the new leader, MP Erin O'Toole, to unite the party going forward?
Sure, and that's always the case. After a leadership race, it is sort of divisive, right? Because people are trying to prove why they deserve to have the job, right? So at the end of the day, you got to bring them all back in. So that'll be this first message that I'll need to do is how do we get everybody back under the same tent? And then from there, I think that he'll be able to move forward, taking the best of what all people brought to the table in terms of leadership ideas. One of the things that I noticed with Peter MacKay and Erin O'Toole, there wasn't a whole lot of difference on their policy in terms of where they were at. And I think that bodes well because a lot of the membership voted for a couple of those. And we had a newcomer in Leslie Lewis who also was very interesting in how well she did. And so I think that there's, I think you can take the best from all these candidates. I think that's the best way to move forward.
Now, there's some rumors that there will be a fall election. Is this true? Do you have any insider information for me?
Well, I've heard from Liberal insiders that they definitely would love to have an election in the fall. Remember a couple of things. They've been spending like crazy right now, all your money and mine, and everyone else's out there, and they can't keep that up. The economy's not doing well. They've done better in COVID the U.S. has done. And guess what? The U.S. just happens to have an election happening as well this fall. So I know for a fact that given the fact that they would love to run against Donald Trump, and also given the fact that Erin O'Toole is not well known outside of Ottawa circles, I would not be surprised if they try and find a way to have a fall election.
Well, let's talk about the issues in that fall election when we come back from this break. Stick around. Welcome back. Once again, we're discussing the recent Conservative leadership result with MP Erin O'Toole being the new leader of the party and what is going to happen this fall, potentially election. MP Dean Allison, MP for Niagara West, is in studio joining me. Thank you, Dean, again for sitting here with me. So we were talking about potentially a fall election. What are some of the steps that a new leader like Erin O'Toole is going to have to do to prepare for that?
Sure. So a couple of things. He's got to get his office in order right away. Now he's the leader of the Conservative Party. And so Andrew Scheer, who was one before, had all his staff. He may keep some. He may get rid of everybody. I really don't know. But he has got to put his touch on the party. So the first thing he'll need to do is get his office organized. Second thing he'll need to do is get the support of the party, reach out to those people that didn't support him, but he wants to bring them all inside the Big Tent. And then the third thing he'll need to do is get the team, get the party, get everyone ready for a potential election that could be called at any time. We're in a minority government. Maybe governments typically last 18 months. We've just gone past a year. There's been some rumblings behind the scenes that Liberals may want to go now before A, the economy gets bad, B, we have a second wave, and C, the fact that they can go against the U.S. and Donald Trump and his record versus Justin Trudeau's record.
So how much does actually the U.S. election play into the politics of a Canadian election?
Well, generally never, not at all. But when you don't want to run on your record, meaning, the economy's not that great and we're struggling with all those things, then obviously if you could point to the south of the border and say, look at how bad their numbers are when it comes to COVID, and you try and make that contrast, then you can throw off people and try and get them to look at not what your record is, but what other people have been doing.
Now, regarding calling a fall election, obviously, the Liberals, who are the minority government, can do that at any point. Maybe the NDP can form a coalition with the Bloc, maybe the Conservatives and topple it. I don't think it would probably be in the best interest of the Conservative Party at this early part in the game of electing a new leader to call election right away. But how much control do they have over that? And frankly, is it fair that Justin Trudeau would call election just soon after there's been a leadership? Well,
and I think, if you look at that, those are any number of possibilities. I can't speak for whether we'll support the throne speech or not. My guess is we probably won't be able to support the throne speech. The Bloc has already said they probably wouldn't support the throne speech as well, which would leave us with the NDP. And I believe probably given where they're at with their finances and their election readiness, I would believe they would probably support the Liberals. So that's one thing. The second thing we've heard is that, the Liberals could still call an election if they wanted to do that. They could have the throne speech like they're going to have in September, and then the next day say, hey, let's have an election. So anything's possible. That's why being a new leader, this happened with Stockwell Day when he became the leader of the party, right, back in 2000. Yes. Because I ran in that election for the Canadian Alliance, and it was tough to get your office ready, get the party ready, and at the same time be on a footing for an election. So I don't agree, and the timing would be terrible. But, once again, Liberals are good at campaigning, in my opinion. They know how to campaign. I just don't think they know how to run the country very well.
So you mentioned the economy, that ours is, faring somewhat okay post-COVID. But what are the steps required then to rebuild our economy post-COVID? What needs to happen? What changes would you like to see?
Well, I think a couple of things. We need to get people back to work. We've had some very rich programs from the government. They're already talking about reforming EI with another $37 billion. That's billion dollars on top of the almost $350 billion in deficit they had. So this was important when we didn't know what was going on in March and April and May. But now as we move forward, we have to get people back to work. We have to figure out how we can keep them safe. But more importantly, we've got to figure out how we can get the economy going again so that we are able to pay for all these things that we have to pay for as a result of what's going on in the economy.
And I can imagine this would be challenging, especially for a Conservative. I remember Andrew Scheer speaking many times during the last election that, we've got to tackle this deficit, this multi-billion-dollar deficit. Well, now our deficit's like 10 times that. How does one even approach a conversation about tackling the deficit?
Well, I think what we have to look at is all what's going on right now in terms of all the programs and where people, and look at how we can cut back a little bit, reduce what we're doing, but also keeping in mind that we need to, make sure we're doing the right things for the economy as well.
Okay, so are you going to be ready to hit the campaign trails if it happens in a few
I am
weeks?
always ready. I would prefer to wait a little while, but I absolutely, in a minority government, I was
Yes.
elected in 4, 6, 8, and 11. We had minority governors there 2, 3 in a row.
That's
and so
right.
we were always on election footing.
And all parties, I assume, are going to be ready. Now, the Green Party, by the way, I think they're still having their leadership, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
And they only have, I think, 3 MPs in government.
They have. I thought it was 2.
Is it 2? My apologies.
2 or 3. Maybe it's 3. Maybe it's
So
3.
perhaps their leadership doesn't necessarily play as largely into potentially whether there's going to be an election or not. But I still feel like it must be a big uphill mountain to climb for an Erin O'Toole just coming off this leadership.
He's got lots to do. There's lots of moving parts right now. So if you look at what's going on, he's just gone through a leadership race, and he's got a whole lot of work to do just to get his office ready, get the party ready, and then looking at the possibility of an election. Wow, that's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. Listen, MP Dean Allison, thank you so much for joining me in studio. We will be right back after this commercial break with Conservative Quebecer Richard Decarie. Stick around. Welcome back. We're again discussing the results of the latest Conservative leadership contest and what this means for Canada, especially when it sounds like there might be an election called this fall. Well, joining me now to give his perspective, and especially important, the Quebec perspective, is Richard Decarie, entrepreneur and former leadership contestant himself. Richard, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your input on this very important topic.
Thanks for the invitation, Tanya.
Excellent. So, with respect to what happened recently with the CPC leadership contest that resulted in Erin O'Toole as the victor over Peter MacKay, were you surprised with the result?
Not at all. I had predicted that it would be Peter O'Toole who would win, so it was either Peter or Erin that would win. And I think Erin O'Toole profited by the fact that the SOCON were so strong that he got it at the third tour. So.
Yes, he had to go down to the third ballot, as you were saying. So, and were you surprised by how strong his Quebec base was?
That was a surprise because he beat Peter's campaign, and I was surprised about that. I know that Derek Sloan did a great campaign in Quebec, and also Leslin. So I was surprised that he added 1,000 votes over there. So good for him.
So let's discuss a little bit about the role that social conservatives played in the leadership contest. In the last several leadership, shall we say, we have seen social conservatives become the determining factor. I remember in the 2017 Conservative leadership contest, it was the combined effort of Pierre Lemieux and Brad Trost that kind of propelled Andrew Scheer just by a hair above Maxime Bernier. And even when I ran recently in the leadership contest in 2018 here in Ontario, it was those votes that propelled Doug Ford to where he is. Was this the same case here with this leadership contest?
Same thing, since Peter MacKay had only 34% on the first ballot. He didn't have enough to win, so that's where Erin O'Toole kicked in with the kingmaker being Leslin Lewis. So the same thing happened this time. And 35% on the first ballot, that's a major statement because, as you remember, Peter MacKay had said that it was like the stinking albatross, all the SOCONs in this party. I think it's more than what he expected, and he paid the price for it.
Yes, because, the two kind of perceived social conservatives in the race were Leslin Lewis and Derek Sloan, and their combined first ballot result was 35%, which is quite high. In fact, Derek Sloan on his own achieved what the joint Brad Trost and Pierre Lemieux did last time. That aside, that is what you felt propelled then, I guess, Erin O'Toole over the top. Over 1/3 of voters ranked a social conservative on the first ballot, but then, later down ballot, they elected Erin O'Toole. So is that fair to say that they were the deciding factor?
They were the decisive factor. And imagine if Jim Carey and myself would have stayed in the race, and there was no reason for the party to kick us out. It was illegitimate, but we would have been 4 pro-life candidates against the 2 others who are pro-choice or pro-abortion. So I think the result would have been very different, and they were so scared about that they kicked us out.
Now, you mentioned social conservative issues. You mentioned the pro-life issue. What other issues would people classify as being social conservative issues, in your opinion?
It's mainly around the culture of life, instead of a culture of death in many ways. So we are for traditional values And I think the Conservative Party should be going back to its root. So that's a problem when you are socially liberal, like Peter MacKay and Erin O'Toole are. So that's the biggest difference. And I think the base, or the member base, is very strongly social conservative, and they should take note about that instead of fighting it like they've been doing since 2016, when the family was extended to everything, not only the traditional family.
Now, you mentioned that you suggest Erin O'Toole's a social liberal. Well, obviously, he had to be palatable in some capacity if he benefited from the social conservative vote down ballot. Why would they have voted for him, in your opinion?
But because that's the system. Once you've written a third choice, the third choice is going to be Erin O'Toole instead of Peter MacKay, because of what I said at the beginning. So the people wrote as a third ballot Erin O'Toole. A lot of people in Quebec that I know didn't put any third or fourth choice. So that goes to, with Derek Sloan, it went to Leslie Lewis, and from Leslie it went to the third ballot of the voters of Leslie Lewis.
Now, I have to stop for a break in just a few seconds, but when we get back, I would really like to discuss more of the role that Quebec will play in not just this leadership, but in the election. So please stick around and we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm joined by Richard Decarie here, discussing the recent leadership contest result and what this bodes for Canada. Now, Richard, you're from Quebec. This is a great topic, and a lot of people want to always discuss what does Quebec's role in the leadership or now in the general election look like. So tell me, what was the role Quebec played in the leadership contest that resulted in Erin O'Toole becoming the new Conservative leader?
When the party was built in 2003 and 4 with Stephen Harper, I was part of that team. And we conceded to the Progressive Conservative the fact that each riding would be 100 points weight and not all the members. So a riding in Quebec with 5 members has the same weight as a riding in Alberta with maybe 5,000 members. So that could be a problem of representation for some, but it gives a big weight for the Quebec province.
So rather than being a one member, one vote, it's basically every riding is represented the same. So what were some of the issues or the issues that matter to Quebec Conservatives in this leadership, and what will matter to them in the general election if we have one this fall?
First of all, the party never asked the candidate as a requisite to be bilingual. And I don't think it makes sense. So if you're not bilingual at the beginning, how can you expect to go in a general election when you know that the weight of Quebec is very important? And also, people in Quebec won't vote for somebody that doesn't speak French. That's simply what it is. During the leadership race, you're talking to members, CPC members, but during the general election, it's more sensitive about that. So it's very important that, first of all, the party should change their rules, and for candidates, future candidates, it should be upfront that you need to be at least being bilingual enough to debate. The French debate was an hour movie, as you remember.
Well, I know there were some struggles with the French language in the debate. I don't know if I'd phrase it exactly the way you did, but that's definitely an interesting way. What actual issues, apart from language, are there any other issues that will matter to Quebec voters in a general election? How would, say, the new Conservative leadership appeal to those Quebec voters? Because right now, predominantly, they voted Liberal or Bloc Québécois.
Sure. Bloc Québécois is going to do better this time if there's a general election, because Liberals are kind of weak with what's happening, even though they are spending so much money. It's incredible to see what they've been doing. And because of that, usually you have a lot of people who are happy to vote for them when they receive money. So Bloc Québécois should be stronger, because also with the leadership of the Conservative Party being what it is, usually it's seen as a different party from Quebec. So Erin O'Toole speaks French, but it will be it will play against the party, I think, in the next general election. And also you have the PPC, Maxime Bernier is from Quebec, so it will drag some voters there too.
And I know that Quebec is seen as the battleground, that and they say the general Toronto area, just the greater Toronto area here in Ontario. What will it take for a leader to win Quebec for any of the parties?
They will have to be very direct, because people are kind of tired of politicians who are trying to say, repeat things that don't make sense, and also they're tired of being lied to. So I think the COVID crisis will play a major role with the next election. Either it's this fall or next spring, because it's still fresh in the memory of many people. And we're seeing a movement now that is being building up based on the fact the mask is mandatory, and a lot of people are very upset about governments in general, politicians in general. And I think somebody that wants to make inroads in Quebec should have a very direct and frank discourse that would help them a lot.
Okay, well, listen, Richard, thank you so much. This is all the time we have, but I appreciate your insight into what seems to be like a very busy fall coming up if we have an election. Well, yet again, the social conservative faction within this Conservative Party decided who the victor would be recently, with Erin O'Toole as the new leader. It's happening time and time again. Clearly, this is a strong voice within the party that will not go away and has not just maintained its presence, but has actually increased over the years. With a pending fall election, we'll have to just see how much social conservative issues and if the Conservative leader, Erin O'Toole, will be able to clinch it this fall. For Counterpoint, I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.